Now, this may seem an odd question, but is fat our friend? We recognize fat when we see it. Sometimes it's highly visible in what we eat, sometimes less so. But when it comes to many foods, we avoid it and go for the no-fat or 1% options, unless we're babies, of course, in which case we choose the full 4.5% organic version. Fats are sometimes solid, sometimes a flowing golden oil. Sometimes we keep fats in the fridge and then prefer to eat them melting on toast. But is eating fat what's making us fat? I mean, everyone seems to be putting on weight. Children are plumper, men have expanding waistlines, and as for women, well, we know it all goes on the hips. Obesity is a modern-day epidemic, and the papers regularly tell us so. In fact, USA Today recently went so far as to say the whole world has a weight problem. And as for the health experts, what do they have to say? Well, Britain's NHS says reduce fat, go for lower fat milk and dairy, and so do the recently published US dietary guidelines, which take us right through to 2020. What about the diet experts? Well, Weight Watchers are the biggest, and they say eat low-fat dairy, choose lean meat without fat, and get half your calories from bread and pasta. That's according to Oprah, who now is a co-owner of the franchise. But in spite of these low-fat guidelines, we are still putting on weight. Could it simply be that we're eating too much food? Well, we are eating more, and the US national statistics show that compared to 40 years ago, Americans eat 72 more grams per day. In Europe, we're not far behind. Seems we're all eating more carbs, a rise of 30% mostly in refined starches and sugars. In fact, compared to 1971, that's the equivalent of one large jam donut every day, which all adds up. One thing is clear, the low-fat regime is not making us any slimmer, or any healthier either. But if the fat we eat is not making us fat, then what is? Well, let's turn things on their heads. Yes, that's you, Oprah. And now the question becomes, how do you go about putting on weight deliberately? It's a while ago that Robert De Niro took on the role of the boxer Jake LaMotta in his famous film Raging Bull, when he also had to play the older version of himself on the right there and add 27 kilos. But he remembers how he did it. He's a bit of a gourmet, Mr. De Niro, so he travelled Europe for 2 months eating lots of pasta, pancakes, ice cream and beer, all of which are rich in starch and sugar, also known as refined carbs. Did you know that carbs are also used to fatten up animals? Corn, wheat and oats for plumper cattle, pigs, ducks or chickens. So perhaps a better question for today is, are we eating too many carbs? There was a time when we were encouraged to eat some food from each food group, if our budgets allowed, but then towards the end of the 20th century, new guidelines arrived with the advice to eat more bread, cereal, rice and pasta, as well as cutting back on fats, oils and sweets. This was supposed to make us both healthier and slimmer, or so we were told. And did we follow these guidelines? Well, yes, indeed. We began to eat more starchy carbs, and although the visual guides changed, the results were the same. In the USA and Europe, we are eating a lot more carb-rich junk food. What about reducing fats in our diet? Well, again, the answer is yes. At most supermarket counters now, low-fat and light foods dominate. Now, should I buy 80% fat-reduced light, extra light, or lightest? And how about sugar? Do we consume less? No. The hidden sugar content of our foods has increased. We've been so focused on fat that we've missed the large amounts of sugar now added to prepared foods. And where does that all leave us? Our behaviour has changed. At the turn of the century, the British drank on average 600 millilitres of whole milk per week, which has steadily dropped to 263 millilitres, with 4 times as much semi-skimmed now being drunk. All because of the great skimmed taste? No, because in our minds, low-fat is the healthier, slimmer option. But it's not. And neither are all the other mass-produced low-fat options out there. There is a way forward if we can regain our balance by setting aside our fear of fat and accepting that butter is better than pasta and regular is better than the low-fat option. You can find out how to eat more healthily in part 2 of Fat is Our Friend.